I'll wait for you to. Let me know. Take a minute, take a breath. It's okay.
All right.
You ready?
Yep.
Okay. Ooh, hold on.
Had I the heavens embroidered cloths, enwrought with golden and silver light, the blue and the dim and the half light, the blue, the dim and the half light, I would spread the clouds under your feet, but I, being poor, have only my dreams. I have spread my dreams, spread my dreams under your feet. Tread softly, because you tread on my dreams, my dreams.
Yes, clap. That was beautiful. We clap in here. I mean, you can do this too, but thank you, Kara. I love it when she sings. Good morning, everyone. My name is Reverend Emily Bruce. I'm the minister of this congregation. I am so happy to welcome you all here today. And thank you all for being here for our service. Just a few quick announcements before we get started. First of all, I'm delighted to say we are welcoming our kids back into the Meetinghouse today. Yay! They have been in self-imposed exile across the street because of COVID, but I'm happy to have them back and happy to have Laura Sanda, our DRE, back in worship also. And actually, we're going to start test driving a new pattern for RE going forward, where the kids will start with us once a month, and then we'll sing them out, and then the other 3 weeks of the month, they will stay across the street. So we're just test driving this new pattern and seeing how it works. Also, a gentle reminder, not so gentle maybe, that today is the last day, the deadline technically, to submit your pledge for next year. Many of you have already done so. Thank you for doing so. If you haven't yet and you're ready, there will be pledge cards at the welcome table across the way during coffee hour. You can also use the online pledge form that was linked in the newsletter last week. It'll be in the newsletter this week. We will also start calling people we haven't heard from yet this coming week. So nicely and politely, but so anyways, if you can, and if you're not ready yet and you need more time, that's totally okay too. The lasagna dinner has been moved to Saturday, April 30th. It was Saturday, April 9th. It is now Saturday, April 30th. And I'm also delighted to announce, where is she? There she is. Diane Richard will be organizing the lasagna dinner. So everybody start reaching out to Diane and asking how you can help. And there'll be a link in the newsletter next week if you want to sign up to make a lasagna. Is that right? Great. Thank you, Diane. We're looking forward to it. Okay, that's everything. So you're all invited to now sit back and relax. Join me in taking a deep breath in and out. Do that a couple more times. It feels good, right? Just get comfortable in your seat. Feel your legs on the floor, feel your back against the pew, and give yourself time to just rest and enjoy the next hour of worship. Your phone, your email, your to-do list, all of it will be waiting for you when this hour is over. So give yourself the time to really relax into this space with this community for the next hour. We will start our worship by lighting our chalice, which is the symbol of our Unitarian Universalist faith. And this morning, I'm delighted to invite up Alana Wheatley, who's going to light our chalice for us. Thank you, Alana. As we begin our worship, I invite you to hear these words by the late Reverend A. Powell Davies, who was an influential Black author and activist during the Civil Rights period and the minister of All Souls Unitarian in Washington, D.C. from 1944 until his death in 1957. He says, "So far as I can see, all the great leaders and the great exemplars of religion possessed faith in life's essence, in its hidden meaning, in its moral claim, and in its rightness of its inner spiritual guidance. And by this, the great ones lived their lives. So must we. There are no problems greater than our power to solve them. There are no burdens greater than our strength. We shape by every moment of our lives the great decisions. Then let us venture still, with reason as a lamp to guide us, but lighted with the light of faith. Come, friends, let us worship together. Please rise in body or in spirit to join us in our opening hymn, number 20 in the gray hymnal, Be Thou My Vision.
Good morning. We're back. What a lovely view. This is exciting. My name is Laura Sanda. I serve First Parish as your Director of Religious Enrichment. And what a joy to be back here in the Meetinghouse, officially welcoming spring today. I'm finally adjusted to daylight savings, and I get to wear my green. Joyous morning. Over the past several weeks, it has been my very great pleasure to continue to learn from and with the children of our congregation. Thank you, all my young friends. I find myself full of awe and impressed by their energy and wisdom and their energy and their ideas and their perspectives. And did I mention their energy? We've been having fun. So I just wanted to take a moment this morning to share a few things that we've been talking about in RE lately. Back in January, we together learned about the teachings of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and specifically how he preached about 3 different forms of love. He talked about how there's romantic love, eros, there's the reciprocal love we have with our friends and family, philia, but he built his movement around a 3rd type of love, agape. Agape love, he taught, was not sentimental or affectionate. Rather, it means having a sense of goodwill for all people, regardless of whether or not we know them, regardless of whether or not we agree with them, and regardless of whether or not they are kind to us. This can be tricky. We don't necessarily want to be friends with people who are acting unkindly, and that's okay and expected, but we do wish for them to come to understand the error of their ways so that over time our community can be reunited and strengthened because we're all interconnected. So I mentioned this today because one of the children brought this up specifically a few weeks after we had that discussion when we were building our RE covenant. It came up that we really should use these 3 kinds of love, and it just highlighted to me how these kids remember what we talk about. They process it, and that becomes a part of them. So good job, my friends. Some of the other ideas that we included in our covenant are that we should listen to one another, share and take turns, and be mindful that there is enough for everyone. We should ask before we take something that someone else is using, and also let's not wreck things that other people are building. Just be nice. These children should run the world. This theme of principles and covenants came up again during the conversations we had last week about what's going on in Ukraine. And the children astutely noticed and commented that the leaders in Russia are not acting towards the Ukrainians in accordance with our UU principles. They are not respecting the environment. They are not building a fair and peaceful world. They are not giving all people a voice. And they are not treating each person as important. They are not being very nice. So what can we do? We build our community here the best way that we know how, with gratitude. And then together, we do what we can to help the people in our interconnected world community who may need us right now. So community. We have all been challenged to ask ourselves this month, why do I give? Why is the church important to me? So I posed this question to our young people. Why is the church important to you? They told me, this church is important because it brings people together, that it has a very nice community. Our church is accepting of all beliefs and supports the queer community. Our church is a place where real friends are made. Our church friends are people we have chosen to be friends with, and not just people who we might happen to go to school with. We get to do fun crafts. Yes, we do. These children should run the world. Yes. So how are we coming together as a community to help the people of Ukraine? Well, if Miss Alana would come up and show, and yeah, just hold it right up. Just hold it right up. Thank you. Last week, we started putting together these sunflower planting kits as a fundraiser for Ukrainian refugees. As many of you know, the sunflower is the national flower of Ukraine and has become a symbol of their resilience and strength and the beauty of their country in this difficult time. Each of these kits has soil, a pot, some seeds, and directions to plant your very own sunflower. They are available for $5 each, and I am excited to say that we have raised $200 so far, right? All of that money will be donated to an organization doing really good work on the ground in Ukraine, World Central Kitchen. World Central Kitchen is a nonprofit providing hot, nourishing meals to people displaced by the fighting, and we are so happy to be able to support their good work. So if you haven't already, come find us at coffee hour, and the bags will be available then. Okay. So with that, I'm going to invite the children to join me, and we are going to head across the street to the Beal House. We'll gather in the vestibule. Thank you.
Please join me in singing the kids off to RE with When Irish Eyes Are Smiling. The words are in your order of service. We're all a little Irish today. As has just been shared so eloquently by Dennis, the unjust war playing out in the Ukraine has broken the heart of our entire global community. Feelings of helplessness and despair pervade our workplaces, our churches, our communities. As I quoted Mother Teresa in my sermon last week, prayer changes people and people change things. Today, we're going to make that statement manifest by writing down words of prayer, hope, and compassion for the people of Ukraine. What are your prayers for Ukraine? Whether you say them aloud or whisper them quietly in your heart, what are the hopes, the blessings, the laments that live in your soul these days? You're each invited to come forward and select a blue or yellow ribbon from the table. You will find black markers there as well. Please take a moment up here to write down a word or phrase of prayer that you would like to offer in your heart for the people of Ukraine. You don't have to write a lot. The intention behind the words is what really matters. If you would like to take a ribbon, and if you'd like a ribbon and marker to be brought to you in your seat, just raise your hand and we'll do that also. When you're finished writing, or if the words don't come and you just want to take a ribbon, that's okay too. Take the ribbon back with you to your seat, and then we'll all tie them to our handrails outside as we leave church today. So these blue and yellow ribbons that flutter in the breeze may be a public witness to all who see them of the prayers that we are all saying now for the people of Ukraine. As we do this ritual, Tony will be playing an instrumental version of a traditional Ukrainian folk song called "The Night is So Moonlit." So please come forward when you're ready. Thank you all for your participation in that ritual. Will you please join me for a moment of prayer? Spirit of life and all that is sacred, who draws us together in a web of holy relationships, make your presence known with us and in us and among us. Hear the prayers we have spoken with our lips this morning. See the prayers we have written on these ribbons this morning. Know the prayers that remain silent on our heart today and every day. May we find the strength to work for a world of justice. May we find resilience in the truth and beauty that surrounds us each day. May we know that we are loved and held by this community that surrounds us. May we know that we are never alone. In the name of the great love that surpasses all understanding, amen. Let us now be still for a moment together. As part of our stewardship campaign this month, we are inviting members of the congregation to come up and share their thoughts on why they pledge to First Parish. And today we invite Carole Bolsey up to give our final testimony on why she gives to support this beloved community. Carole?
Good morning, I'm Carole Bolsey. So I was asked to answer the question, why do I give? And at first it really baffled me because I couldn't find an equivalence between money and what I find here. It just didn't fit. And since all communities require money to exist, to thrive, and to prosper, I'm happy to exchange money for unnameable gifts, the imponderable value that I receive here. But when I try to define and explain what these things are, answering that question, it doesn't quite fit. So I keep coming back to what I'll call continuity, a feature of time. It began with my buying an old farmhouse from 1840 with an ancient barn from 1637 here in Kingston when I was 34 years old, and putting down a taproot, calling this place home, and investing myself in it from then on. Inhabiting my old house is an honor, conserving and enjoying and possessing it even for the briefness of a lifetime, before yielding it to its next occupants, passing it along to the continuity of time and the successful continuation of life as we know it here in this very blessed place on the eastern fringe of this immense continent. Some years ago, I told this gathering about the introduction of my mother and myself into this parish when we first arrived here. We knew no one for 40 miles around, sitting at what was then a lunch counter in the then Stop and Shop where you could only buy brown iceberg lettuce. And remember, and celery you could tie in a bow. And asking a pretty white-haired lady where we might meet nice people and find a sewing group for my mom. She said energetically, "Oh, go see the Unitarians. They're always the nicest people." So we did, and discovered the Women's Alliance sewing group in Sampson Hall. This had a great effect on me at the time. The women sat, sewed, and talked, and didn't gossip at all. They seemed very old to me then when I was young. Years later, my husband and I sadly moved away from Kingston to Washington, D.C. and Maryland for 14 years. But then we came back in 2004, and the group was still there, missing a couple of members, but in many ways beautifully unchanged. But how many things remain unchanged for 14 years? For over 40 years? In the years since then, the group has dwindled and vanished. But while many things have come and gone over time, the feeling of continuity, the air of changelessness gives color and sweetness to time here. Around here, we get to live in houses that are 200 years old, let alone 400 years old like my barn. It makes time so real, so present, so pervasively tangible. But who cares about time? I'm not sure why I do. Maybe it's because my father died suddenly of a heart attack when I was 14. And I felt the fragility and brevity of life ever since. That isn't a bad thing. It makes me accept death as a fact of life. It makes me eager to make intensive use of time to savor and cherish it, however much or little of it might be in store for me. And what does all this have to do with the question, why do I give? I give for the privilege of finding the best folk, the kindest, the most tolerant, the most conscientious, the most committed, the best educated, the most amiable and least judgmental folk here in this lovely sanctuary where Twig and I were married in 1989 on any given Sunday, and for a little while over coffee, over shared ideas and values, in a kind of friendship I've never known before. I've never felt fellowship with a group before. I'm an only child and not a joiner of teams or associations or groups or even committees. I've never had a relationship with a number of individuals gathered for shared values and fellowship before. So I'm chipping in for a place to meet friends who grow dearer with time, with whom I have grown ties over the years, with whom I'm cultivating memories, sharing political rants, toiling together to raise modest sums, keeping up this lovely church building, enabling and conserving our community together. This is a place of befriending, and I have been befriended here in an easy and natural way, and this is precious to me.
Thank you, Carole. Thank you for those words. When we give, we say yes to something we value. In this congregation, we take up an offering each week to say yes to the values of our UU faith and yes to this beloved community. Today, we will be devoting all of the money that we collect to the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee's Emergency Response Fund to aid the people of Ukraine. Since their beginnings, serving refugees displaced by Nazi aggression during World War II, the UU Service Committee has been called to respond to unexpected crises and provide resources to communities whose needs are urgent and access to aid is limited. The UU Service Committee's first step is to send emergency relief funding to groups who are working in the ground in Eastern Europe. This will happen quickly as they have existing partners in the area from our Syrian refugee work. This includes partners such as the Hungarian Helsinki Committee, who are already responding to the current crisis by providing free legal assistance, counseling, and representation so that Ukrainian asylum seekers receive temporary protections immediately. Following the relief grants, UUSC's team will develop a strategy for longer-term recovery alongside those same partners. And just as UUSC is being called to aid those impacted by the crisis in Ukraine now, their commitment to their partners facing displacement and violence in other parts of the world, such as Haiti and Burma, remain just as strong as ever. On behalf of the UUSC, thank you all for your support in this time of great need. Please give as you were able. If you have written a check today, we ask that you make it out to First Parish and just write Ukraine or UUSC in the memo line. If you've already made it out to UUSC, that's okay too. Either way, it'll get to the right place. So today's offering will be gratefully received, and our offering anthem is A Gaelic Blessing by John Rutter. Thank you, choir. This former Episcopalian loves John Rutter, so I could listen to that all day. I still have a little bit of a cough, so forgive me for the cough drop in my cheek right now, but you'd rather that than hear me cough into the microphone. So today, as those of you wearing green know, and thank you for wearing green, we are somewhat belatedly celebrating St. Patrick's Day. I hope those of you that wanted it had the chance to drink your green beer and wear shamrocks and all that stuff last Thursday. I can't say that St. Patrick's Day holds any kind of significance for me. I mean, in my wayward youth, I had lots of green beer in my past, let's just say that. And maybe it holds a little bit of irritation because every year on March 17th, I have to say, no, I'm Scottish, not Irish. No offense to the Irish. But I love Irish music, and we have an Irish music director. And so this is an opportunity I just couldn't pass up. So thank you, Tony and choir, and Kara, especially, for all of your beautiful music today. But this got me wondering, what's the story behind St. Patrick? Who was he, and how did it get to be that we still celebrate him some 1,500 years after he lived? And how could anything about a 5th century saint still possibly be relevant to us today? So I'm going to start off with a little brief history. First of all, St. Patrick was born in England, so he's English, not Irish, born to a wealthy family. At the age of 16, he was captured by a group of Irish raiders that were attacking his family's estate, and he was taken to Ireland and enslaved for 6 years. Right? During this time of enslavement, he worked as a shepherd in the fields. And it is said that while he was out there in the fields alone and afraid, that he turned to religion for comfort. Until this time, he wasn't particularly religious, and neither was his family. So out on the fields of Ireland as an enslaved shepherd, St. Patrick became a Christian. After 6 years, he managed to escape and walked the 200 miles back home to England. And once he got home and he was safe and sound, he had a vision. An angel came to him, and he heard the voice of God telling him to return to Ireland and minister to the people there. So he became a priest and did just that. And he's widely credited for bringing Christianity to the pagan Irish, adopting many of their rituals and symbols and making them part of the church, like the Celtic cross, to name but one thing. One of the most interesting myths about St. Patrick that I love is the one about driving all the snakes out of Ireland. Who's heard that one? Oh, wow. Okay. And Ireland is snake-free to this day. I did not know that. And now I want to go visit Ireland. The story goes that he stood at the top of a hill and preached a sermon, and it was so powerful that it terrified all the serpents in the land, and they swam into the water and perished. Now, of course, there's debate. I don't even think there's debate about whether that actually happened. I'm going to take that back. But there's a lot of reasons behind this story, behind why this myth persists. Well, first of all, I will say that there never were snakes in Ireland in the first place, apparently, because it's an island. And in its ancient history, it was covered with ice. So you can't really drive out snakes from a place that there are no snakes. But also some say it's a reference to his overcoming his theological foes, both inside and outside the church. And still others say it's a metaphor for how he rid Ireland of its pagan traditions. Not going to wade into a lot of that here. We'll be here for a while. But I just want to note there's a whole sermon in here about the Catholic Church and how they spread Christianity by colonizing indigenous custom and tradition. But it's not a happy sermon, so we're not going to go there today. But one of the things that does compel me about St. Patrick is the fact that after escaping enslavement, he returned to minister to the people, that his faith in God was so deep and so profound that it compelled him to go straight back to the source of 6 years of anguish and suffering. I can't imagine feeling so strongly about anything that I would be willing to do that. Would you? And to do it as a minister would, for me at least, entail an awful lot of forgiveness on my part first, and courage. In my research, I came across what's called the breastplate prayer of St. Patrick. It's attributed to him, and it's written as an incantation for protection during a journey. It contains some language that I'm sure some of you, especially maybe some former Catholics, have heard: Christ above me, Christ below me, Christ before me, Christ behind me. So the entire prayer is quite long. I'm not going to read it to you, but there's one beautiful section that really stuck out to me. And it goes like this: I arise today through the strength of heaven, the light of the sun, the radiance of the moon, the splendor of fire, the speed of lightning, the swiftness of wind, the depth of the sea, the stability of the earth, the firmness of rock. Now, any prayer that draws on nature imagery works for me. And I can imagine praying these words for strength and courage before a big journey with an awfully intimidating destination. I've read this prayer several times this week as I thought about this sermon. And I was originally, going to preach on forgiveness, as you see by the title in your order of service. I was going to preach about how St. Patrick forgave his oppressors and went back to minister to them, and wasn't that hard? And how can we forgive those in our lives who have done us harm? But with everything going on in the world right now, especially, of course, the war in Ukraine, I instead started thinking about faith, about St. Patrick's faith that led him back to Ireland, about faith that grounds us and helps us do really hard things, like fight an unjust war to defend our country. What do you have faith in, friends? And when I say faith, what I'm really talking about is trust, the kind of trust that's deep and foundational and unshakable. So if the word trust works better for you than the word faith, I invite you to use it. But where does your faith reside? And we're Unitarian Universalists, so I would expect the answers to be across the board. For me, I have several answers to that question, but the first is, that I do believe there is a source that is stronger and deeper and greater than all of us, that wants our flourishing, that wants us to have peace and love and freedom. And from that source flows all of the beauty, love, grace, and compassion that humans have the ability to share. And believing in that source that I call God keeps me going, especially on the really hard, dark days. And what about you? We've all experienced hardship and pain and suffering. Many of us may be in the middle of a hard time right now, and we are all watching the global stage with fear and trembling. So what is grounding you in this time? Where does your faith lie? In what can you put your trust? Because we all have to have faith in something, right? It doesn't have to be a God. It doesn't have to be religion. It can be faith in ourselves, faith in our ability to weather whatever life can throw at us. It can be faith in our spouse, our family, our friends, those we instinctively turn to for support and understanding. It can be faith in our nation, faith in certain leaders, faith in art. I have faith in art and science and reason. I've been thinking a lot this week about the Ukrainian president, Volodymyr, I've practiced saying his name, Volodymyr Zelensky, and wondering where his faith lies. Because you would have to agree that he is a man who is deeply compelled by the courage of his convictions. He would have to be to face what he's facing and to put the face he is putting on this war out in public. Surprisingly, he doesn't talk about his Jewish faith much. And if you know anything about him, you know he's Jewish. In a 2020 interview with the Times of Israel, he is quoted as saying, "I never speak about religion and I never speak about God, but because I have my own personal opinion about it. But of course, I believe in God and I speak with him only in those moments which are personal for me." But he does talk publicly a lot about truth and justice. In his speech to Congress this week, he said, quote, "Today, the Ukrainian people are defending not only Ukraine, we are fighting for the values of Europe and the world, sacrificing our lives in the name of the future. That's why today the American people are helping not just Ukraine, but Europe and the world to give the planet the life, to keep justice in history. To give the planet the life, to keep justice in history." For me, that ties the Ukrainian struggle not only to democracy and freedom from oppression, but to the very life of the planet that we share. And this ideal of keeping justice as a part of history, I never thought about that before, but believing in the fight to preserve the life of justice itself, that's incredibly moving to me. That is the solid ground of conviction and faith right there. And that is the faith that moves mountains, brings down oppressors, we pray, and changes the course of history. Now, not surprisingly, one of Zelensky's advisors told the Washington Post that, quote, "He is a person who has a profound sense of right and wrong. He will never acquiesce when he thinks something is wrong." And Zelensky himself has said, "I always react painfully to lies. That is the main feature that my parents gave me." If only more of our politicians had such a moral compass. Some do, some do, some do. I read an interesting op-ed in the New York Times this week entitled "4 Opinion Writers on the War." It was a wide-ranging conversation about what they each think will happen, what Putin might do, how Europe and the US should be responding or will be responding. One of the columnists was David Brooks, who made the point that this terrible war in Ukraine has had an effect on our faith in ourselves and the notion of democracy here in the US and also in Europe. He says, quote, "It has reawakened our faith in ourselves. We have more faith, frankly, in our leaders who've done pretty well, and faith in our system, and maybe faith in some that we can actually unify." And some of you may have read, many news outlets are reporting that Republicans and Democrats right now are far more unified than they have been since September 11th. The Connecticut Senator Chris Coons said, quote, "It's bringing Congress together in a way, frankly, I haven't seen in my 12 years in the Senate. And in our bitterly polarized political climate, I will say that is something I never thought I would see. I thought we were no way back, we'd gone too far down that road to ever return. And I know this won't last forever, but it gives me hope. And it compels me not to give up my faith in our country, in our democracy, and our ability to be a force of peace and justice in the world. Like many of you, that faith has been sorely tested since the 2016 election. But right now I have a little bit of hope, a little seed, a sunflower seed of hope. So I ask you again, where does your faith lie? And what do you place your trust? Because friends, we're going to need it for the weeks and months ahead. I don't know what's going to happen. Neither do any of us. We can't know what's coming. But what I know for sure is that the anxiety and the fear that is coursing through the world right now has the power to kill us before any real threat, unless we have the solid ground of something to believe in to support us. And what's that firm ground for you? Who or what do you absolutely trust? Where is the source of strength that you can call upon again and again to weather the storms that are here and the ones that might be on the way? Friends, I love you all, and I know that I can turn to you for strength. I know that you have my back, just as I hope you know that I have yours. So if you're sitting there unsure about your answers to all of these questions, and if you're scared about the state of the world, if you feel a little bit like St. Patrick must have felt during those 6 years of enslavement, alone, afraid, longing for comfort, let me give you one answer to these questions. Have faith in us. Have faith in this community, in the faces of the people around you, because we have your back and we are in this with you. None of us are alone in this moment. If you can't be sure of much, let us be sure for you. Let us hold trust for you. In a world full of uncertainty, you can have faith in us and this community. And together, let us step into whatever unknown lies ahead of us. May it be so. Amen. And now please rise in body or in spirit and join us for our closing hymn, Rising Green, number 1068 in the Teal hymnal. We will sing the first 3 verses.